Forget chivalry. In the brutal world of medieval warfare, the sword was only the beginning. If you think Game of Thrones was violent, wait until you see what real knights, mercenaries, and foot soldiers carried into battle. In this episode of Medieval Memoirs, we break down 30 of the most brutal, bone-breaking, fear-inducing weapons from the medieval battlefield used not for honor, but for pure survival. 1. The Morning Star, the Spiked Nightmare. If a mace and a flail had a terrifying baby, it would be the Morning Star, a heavy club-like weapon with a spiked steel ball either fixed or chained to a handle. The Morning Star didn't just injure, it mutilated. This was not a weapon of elegance, it was a tool of trauma. One swing could crush armor, cave in skulls, or send limbs flying. It made even seasoned soldiers hesitate. Because you didn't block a Morning Star, you prayed it missed. Originally used by infantry and foot soldiers, the Morning Star became the symbol of ruthless practicality. Some were simple iron, others were gilded, personalized, or laced with poison. It wasn't noble, it was brutal, and that's what made it so effective. 2. The Flail, the unpredictable menace, a wooden handle connected to a spiked iron ball by chain. Sounds awkward. That was the point. The flail's strength wasn't in precision, it was in chaos. It swung around shields, wrapped around swords, and shattered helmets with wild, looping arcs. Fighting someone with a flail was like fighting gravity itself. Originating in Eastern Europe, flails were originally threshing tools repurposed into weapons. Farmers turned soldiers wielded them with deadly improvisation. It was unpredictable, terrifying, and nearly impossible to defend against. You didn't fight the flail, you ran from it. 3. The War Hammer, the Night Crusher. When plate armor rose, swords fell. Enter the War Hammer, compact, brutal, efficient. One side was a flat hammer for blunt trauma, the other, a deadly spike to pierce through helmets and visors, used by knights, foot soldiers, and anyone sick of bouncing off armor. The War Hammer was a response to technology, and it worked. You didn't need finesse, you needed force. And the War Hammer delivered. 4. The Crossbow, the Equalizer, powerful, silent, deadly. The crossbow didn't care about your noble blood or shiny armor. It leveled the battlefield. Easy to train, easy to fire, and incredibly hard to stop. A well-placed bolt could pierce chainmail at 100 yards. Pope Urban II even tried to ban it, calling it too deadly. It didn't require honor, just aim, and that made it terrifying. 5. The Halberd, the hybrid killer, part spear, part axe, part hook. The halberd was a multi-tool of medieval carnage. It slashed, it stabbed, it hooked knights off horses. Swiss infantry turned it into an art form, holding off cavalry charges with synchronized formations. It was graceful until it split your skull. A favorite among city militias, palace guards, and professional soldiers. Versatile, efficient, and theatrical in all the worst ways. 6. The Mace, the Bone Breaker, simple, brutal, and unapologetic. The mace was pure impact, a metal club, designed to break bones even through armor. It didn't slice, it didn't pierce, it smashed, and it did so spectacularly. Church leaders often carried maces instead of swords, claiming it let them fight without shedding blood. Technically true, morally debatable. 7. The Longbow, death from a distance, 6 feet of you, a 100-pound draw. The English longbow was legend. It took years to master, but once trained, an archer could unleash a rain of arrows that turned skies black and battlefields red. At Agincourt, English archers devastated French knights before they ever closed the distance. Armor meant little when hit from above. It wasn't personal. It was power in waves. 8. The boiling oil, pain from the parapets. It wasn't always weapons you held. Sometimes, it was what you poured. Castles used gravity as a weapon, dumping boiling oil, water, or even sand on attackers below. It wasn't elegant, but it was horrifyingly effective. Burns, blindness, panic, all from above. Siege ladders stopped climbing when the oil started falling. 9. The sword breaker, the defensive offense, a dagger with deep notches. Its job: catch your opponent's blade and snap it. Small, fast, and deadly in a duel. The sword breaker wasn't for mass battles. It was for assassins, bodyguards, and personal vengeance. You don't block with it. You end a fight with it. 10. The falchion, the forgotten executioner. A cousin of the machete, the falchion was short, heavy, and curved. It chopped through bone, armor, and arrogance. Used by soldiers and executioners alike, the falchion blended function and intimidation. Less famous than swords but far more feared. It didn't parry, it punished. 11. The man-catcher, the night collector. It looked like a terrifying fork on a pole, and it was. The man-catcher was designed to trap, not kill. A metal-pronged collar at the end could ensnare a rider or noble and hold them down. Think riot control meets ransom strategy. Especially useful in tournaments, or when you wanted your enemy alive, but barely. 12. The ballista, medieval sniper artillery, a giant crossbow that hurled bolts the size of fence posts. The ballista was siege warfare's precision strike, used to pierce walls, ships, or unlucky knights. It was slow to reload, but devastating when it hit. Imagine being shot by a tree. 13. The bec de Corbin, the crow's beak. Like the warhammer's edgy cousin, the bec de Corbin was a pole weapon with a hammer on one side and a curved spike like a beak on the other. It tore through plate armor and found the weak spots. It wasn't elegant, it was relentless. 14. The throwing axe, the surprise closer, not just for show. The throwing axe, like the Francisca, was used by warriors to disrupt enemy lines before melee. They weren't precision weapons, they were panic starters. Flying iron meant shields up, heads down, and formations broken. 15. The scythe, death's real tool. During peasant uprisings or desperation defense, scythes were repurposed into war tools. Long, curved, and brutal, they looked like the Grim Reaper's favorite for a reason. They weren't balanced, they weren't tactical, but they terrified anyone who saw one coming. 16. The billhook, the blade of the fields, part pruning tool, part battlefield nightmare. The billhook could stab, hack, and hook riders off horses. Used widely by English infantry. It was effective in mass formations, cheap, easy to sharpen, horrifying in groups. 17. The tower shield, the moving wall, less a weapon, more a strategy. These massive shields covered the entire body and allowed slow, deliberate advances. Combined with spears or crossbows, they turned soldiers into walking bunkers. In siege battles, they bought time and saved lives. 18. The dagger, the silent finisher. In the chaos of battle, when swords failed or were dropped, the dagger remained. Used in grappling, assassination, and finishing moves. Hidden, fast, and lethal at close range. Knights had ornate ones. Assassins carried poison-tipped ones. Either way, the end was sharp. 19. Greek fire, the unholy flame, a Byzantine weapon so terrifying it was considered demonic. Greek fire was a liquid incendiary that stuck to ships and armor and couldn't be put out with water. Sprayed from tubes, thrown in pots, or used in naval battles, it was medieval napalm. Its recipe remains a mystery. 20. The lance, the noble impaler, iconic in jousts, but deadly in war. A charging knight with a lance could skewer a man clean through. Used to break enemy lines, crash into infantry, or dismount other riders. It was majestic, violent, and often fatal to both sides. 21. The spiked shield, offense meets defense. Not content with just blocking attacks, some medieval shields came with their own bite. Enter the spiked shield, a heavy wooden or metal shield fitted with a central spike or perimeter studs. Used in close quarters, it bashed and jabbed with devastating effect. It wasn't just to stop arrows, it was to break noses and crush ribs. 22. The claymore, the Highland monster, two-handed, Scottish, and terrifying. The claymore wasn't just a sword, it was a message. Its massive size allowed for sweeping strikes that could take down multiple opponents. It took strength to wield, but in the right hands, it turned men into legends. 23. The caltrop, pain underfoot, a tiny terror, 4 spikes arranged so that one always points up. Thrown across fields or near gates, caltrops crippled horses, maimed soldiers, and disrupted charges. Easy to make, easy to carry, infuriatingly effective. 24. The pavis, the portable wall, a tall shield used by crossbowmen. The pavis was planted into the ground to create mobile cover during reload. Some were even decorated with heraldry or prayers. It wasn't fast, but it made sure you stayed alive just long enough to shoot again. 25. The siege tower, the moving castle, not handheld, but definitely medieval. These towering wooden structures rolled up to castle walls, protecting troops and allowing them to scale heights under fire. Siege towers were slow, huge, and terrifying. A walking fortress to break other fortresses. 26. The spetum, the polem with a plan, a lesser-known cousin of the spear. The spetum had a central thrusting blade, flanked by 2 hooked arms. It stabbed, hooked, and tore. Perfect for pulling enemies from horseback or from their dignity. 27. The pilum, Rome's lingering legacy. Used well into the early Middle Ages, the pilum was a throwing spear designed to bend on impact, making it hard to reuse and impossible to throw back. Simple, smart, and demoralizing. 28. The chain whip, chaos in motion. Imported from Eastern techniques, chain whips made their way into some medieval martial traditions. Hard to control, harder to predict. A blur of metal that danced, bit, and lashed. Terrifying in the hands of a master. 29. The hook sword, the twin curve killers, dual-wielded, curved, hooked. Originating in the East, hook swords allowed for slashing, trapping, and even disarming enemies. Rare in Europe, but rumored to be carried by mercenaries or exotic bodyguards. 30. The throwing knife, the quick ender, not a battlefield weapon, but deadly in tight spaces. Thrown from the shadows, the throwing knife was the silent scream before death. Used by spies, scouts, and those who didn't like long conversations. 30 weapons, 30 nightmares, and we've only scratched the steel-plated surface of medieval brutality. Some were crude, some were clever. All were designed with one goal: end the fight before it begins. Thanks for enduring another round of medieval memoirs. Don't forget to like, comment, Unsubscribe unless you want a caltrip in your boot.